question goes to Ms. Hovey first. What legislative accomplishments are you most proud of?
Thank you. I have a record that I stand strong on, and I'm very proud of it. I have introduced, sponsored, and co-sponsored legislation that allowed for the multi-million-dollar project to locate here in Monroe, and it did pass. I provided legislation that provided for the deferment of the mandate that would have cost this community about $100,000. That's the in-school suspension bill. And the fact of the matter is, as ranking member on education, it's important that all children in the state receive an adequate education. Because of my legislation, that bill was deferred for a year, while I have introduced a formula that will provide for exemptions for towns like Monroe and Newtown that do not need to be under the law.
Thank you. Ms. Mel.
I participated in all phases of the legislative process, from writing legislation to getting it passed. My opponent is incorrect, and you can verify that record. She's never introduced a bill that has been passed that hasn't been introduced by the majority. I've worked closely with both the House and Senate leaders, and I formed a solid relationship. My opponent can't have it both ways. She can't say, oh, we're going to be fair to everyone on education, and then slam me because I made my living in the city of Bridgeport. Her husband's a Bridgeport fireman. And to those of you out there who work for the city of Bridgeport, I guess that's a bad thing if you want to make a living and you're good at your job. I've led legislation for 19 area mayors that lower costs for municipalities. The unfunded mandate, my opponent spoke of, she wasn't even on the co-sponsoring the underlying legislation to get postponed. And the year before that, she was much before it, before she was against it. So don't let my opponent lie to you or scare you. Listen very closely to what she has to say and see what the record reflects.
Time. Move on.
Yes, ma'am. This just goes to show that my opponent does not understand the legislative process. The fact of the matter is that initially everyone introduces legislation, and then the legislation goes to the specific committees. The committees then have public hearings, and people pick and choose what is going to be brought out in what's known as omnibus bills. I, in fact, have had a multitude of my pieces of legislation included in the omnibus bills.
Okay. I'm sorry, that's time.
Yes, the Education Committee is controlled by the two chairmen and the vice chairman, and they really decide what gets out of committee as other committees do. Again, you can't get bills out of committee unless you have the support of the majority. It's simply the definition of the word majority, and you can't force it. You can sign on with them, but you can't force it.